Now, Peter, you recently published a paper with MLI about the need for the government to develop what you call a comprehensive media strategy. So maybe you could just give us the highlights. What does the government need to focus on in terms of ensuring a healthy media sector in Canada?
Well, it needs to understand that there's been a great disruption due to the internet. Like, it's blown up the newspaper industry essentially, and all good things must pass. I guess this is just what happens. We had a great livery stable and hay industry until somebody invented the automobile, right? I mean, this is just the story of history, and same with the printing press made a big impact when it was invented. Understand the extent of the challenge in front of in front of us in order to make sure that we get good information. We've been lurching from one thing to the other. The local journalism initiative was a $10 million a year for 5 years, and now it's $20 million a year, and it's going to be extended, right? That was a sort of temporary stopgap while newspapers adjusted. And then there was the labor tax credit, which is about $120 million a year for 5 years, and that's now been extended, right? So we're at and then there's the Online News Act that we've been talking about. And then there's funding for the CBC and uncertainty about what its mandate is. Cabinet was overruled the CRTC on that. So all of these things seem to be taking, and then there's CRT itself. All of these things are taking place independent of a broader strategy. So it's kind of like, okay, if you're going to get into having certain policy structures, whether they're tax credits or other things for news industry, let's have that conversation, because right now we're at risk of making our news industry permanently dependent on government subsidy, which is only going to lead to lower public trust in media, which means they're going to need more subsidy, which is going to lead to lower public trust, et cetera, et cetera. It's not sensible, and it won't end well.
No, it certainly sounds like a potential downward spiral. I want to get to the CBC and its mandate in a minute, but I quickly wanted to touch on the CRTC. Is there a role for the CRTC in a media strategy, or do you think that it, as an entity, it's not fit for purpose here?
Well, I mean, I think the CRTC itself is outdated and outmoded and should be replaced by a Canadian Communications Commission of some kind that actually has policies based on the understanding that we live in a new technology age and the internet is everything, and access and affordability are the main focuses in terms of that. That said, the way things are presented right now, it has to be part of this conversation, because right now, for instance, it insists that every radio station have a news component to it. And that makes a lot of sense if you're talking about making sure that if you're going to give somebody a radio license in Yellowknife or Lac La Ronge or Bagotville, that they serve the local community, that there's a public good that they are serving by doing that. In cities like Vancouver and Toronto and Montreal, where you've got 40 or 50 licensed radio stations, it makes no sense at all to make all of them do news, particularly when most of them just have, basically have very small newsrooms and aren't able to do anything more than top line news for that. So they do have to be part of the conversation for sure, because they can't be doing things that are disrupting the good somebody's trying to do elsewhere.
Right. We've got about 45 seconds here just to talk about the CBC. In your view, what has gone wrong with the CBC, drifting beyond its mandate, and what should it be focusing on?
Well, it should be a public broadcaster, and it isn't. It's a publicly funded commercial broadcaster. It competes with the private sector in television for advertising, and it competes with the private sector as an online news product. It'll be the biggest single recipient of money through Bill C-18, and that's ridiculous. Having a good public broadcaster is, I think, a good idea, but having a publicly funded commercial broadcaster that occasionally pretends to be a public broadcaster and actually is sometimes on radio it's just crazy. Like, that makes no sense at all, and we need to really fix that.